The crowbar bit into the rusted hasp with a metallic shriek, the sound dead in the corridor's oppressive silence. Sarah's knuckles were white, wrapped around the cold, greasy metal. The $40 she'd paid the locksmith, a man with sympathetic eyes and calloused hands who probably made more in that 10 minutes than she did in a day, was her last liquid cash. This wasn't just an insult, it was the final, bitter punchline to a joke she'd been living her whole life. The corrugated metal door rattled up, a sound like dry bones, protesting every inch, scraping against its tracks with a nails-on chalkboard scream that set her teeth on edge. It opened onto a wall of darkness that smelled of mildew, old tires, and a bottom note of something sour, like forgotten grief. The air was so still, so heavy, it felt like she was breathing in decades of failure. She fumbled along the gritty wall for the string, her fingers brushing cobwebs and what she prayed was just flaking paint. A click, and a single fly-specked 60-watt bulb flickered on, casting a weak, jaundiced glow over the sum total of her inheritance. Unit 14B, 10 feet by 20 feet of failure. His failure, and now, by legal decree, hers. It was a tomb of junk. Not just junk, but a monument to a life of broken things. Water-stained cardboard boxes, their sides bulging and soft, slumped against a three-legged dresser with missing knobs. A sheet, gray with grime, covered a shape she recognized with a fresh, sharp pang of childish anger. The ugly, avocado-green recliner he'd always chosen over a visit, the one he'd supposedly been sitting in when his heart finally gave out. Stacked against the back wall, disappearing into the shadows, were cracked tires, rusting tool chests, and yellowed newspapers stacked in precarious towers. The top one, she could see, had a headline about a local election a decade ago. He hadn't just thrown things away, he had curated his own neglect. There was a box of his old high school track trophies, all tarnished, a broken typewriter, a single child-sized ice skate. Each item was a story that had ended badly. She kicked a stack of damp National Geographics, the sound a dull, unsatisfying thud. "This is it, Dad?" she whispered, the air tasting like dust and time. "This is what you leave me? A bill?" The memory of the lawyer's office, just 3 days ago, was still scalding. She'd sat on a leather chair that was too big and too cold, wearing her best black pants from Walmart, the ones she saved for job interviews and funerals. She'd had to borrow $10 from Marge at the diner just to pay for the parking garage. Opposite her sat her Aunt Carol, in a crisp beige suit that probably cost more than Sarah's car, and her Uncle Mark, clearing his throat with a rhythmic, judgmental rasp. The lawyer, a man named Henderson, read the will with a practiced neutrality, his voice gliding over the paltry assets as if they were an inconvenience. "To my sister, Carol Jensen," he'd read, not looking up, "I leave the house at 412 Willow Creek and its contents, in recognition of her assistance in my final years." Sarah had almost choked. Assistance? Carol hadn't spoken to him in 5 years, not since it refused to sign the house over to her outright. Carol, who had told Sarah just last Christmas that her father was a lost cause, honey. Some people are just born to break things. "To my brother, Mark Jensen, my 1998 Ford F-150. Mark had nodded, satisfied, as if he'd won something. "Well, it's a start," he'd muttered, already calculating what he'd get for scrap. "And to my daughter, Sarah." Henderson had paused, shuffling a paper, the first sign of discomfort he'd shown. He'd adjusted his glasses. "To Sarah, I leave the contents of Lakeside Storage Unit 14B and the outstanding balance thereon." There was a beat of silence, so profound Sarah could hear the ticking of the expensive clock on the wall. It sounded like a bomb. And then Uncle Mark had let out a bark of a laugh, a sharp, sudden sound he tried to stifle as a cough. It was too late. Aunt Carol hadn't laughed. She'd simply smiled, a thin, tight line of pity that was 1,000 times worse. "Well," Carol had said, reaching over to pat Sarah's arm, her fingers cold even through Sarah's sleeve, her rings clicking together. "At least you can sell the junk for scrap, might cover the back rent. You know your father, he never could manage his affairs. Don't you worry, Sarah, you can still come over for Sunday dinner. I'll pack you up some leftovers for your boy." The laughter, quiet but sharp, and the suffocating, cloying pity had followed her all the way out of the building. Now, standing in the middle of the unit, the shame felt as cold and damp as the concrete floor. She was a single mother, working 60 hours a week at the Sunrise Diner, slinging hash browns and watery coffee for tips that barely covered gas. The $300 in back rent on this hole was her car insurance payment. The eviction notice taped to her apartment door with its glaring red final notice stamp felt like a ticking bomb. She'd come to clear it out, to salvage what she could, a few tools maybe, to sign the papers, and to walk away from his memory forever. She yanked the sheet off the green recliner, fueled by a sudden bitter rage. "You couldn't even leave me nothing?" She spat at the empty chair. "You had to leave me debt?" A small cloud of dust mites and mold spores exploded into the weak light. She coughed, a dry, racking hack, stumbling backward. Her worn sneaker, the one with the hole in the toe, caught on something. It wasn't a box. It wasn't a tire. It was the floor itself. A warped edge of the cheap plywood paneling that someone, he, had laid over the concrete, probably to keep the boxes off the damp. It was loose. She stared at it. It was just a stupid piece of wood. It was probably covering a crack. But it was loose. Everything in her life was locked down, final and over. This one thing was not. Driven by a sudden, irrational curiosity that felt more like a command, she dropped to her knees. The dust and grime instantly stained her jeans. She worked her fingers under the edge, pulling. The wood, swollen with damp, resisted. A splinter jammed deep under her thumbnail, and she hissed, pulling her hand back. The sharp pain lanced through her, cutting through the fog of her grief. She looked at her bleeding finger, and the rage came back, cold and clean. She wasn't asking. She grabbed the crowbar. She didn't just pry, she attacked. She jammed the metal claw into the gap and threw her entire weight, all 120 pounds of desperation, into it. Wood splintered. Rusted nails screamed as they were torn from the concrete. The panel, 3 feet by 3 feet, ripped free with a final cracking pop, revealing a dark shadow cavity beneath. It wasn't empty. Sitting perfectly in the hollow, as if placed there only yesterday, was a metal box. It was wrapped in what looked like an old Army-issue oilcloth, the canvas stiff and dark. Beneath the wrapping, she could see it was an old-fashioned cash box, olive green, with a simple fold-over latch. It wasn't even locked. Her heart wasn't pounding. It had stopped. This was the moment. The air was too thick to breathe. The smell of mildew and old tires was gone, replaced by the metallic tang of her own adrenaline. Her first thought, a cold wash of fear, was, "It's a gun, or drugs." This was the other story Aunt Carol had hinted at, that her father wasn't just a drunk, but dangerous. With hands that shook so badly she could barely control them, she reached into the dark, spider-webbed space and lifted the box. It was heavy, heavier than it had any right to be. She set it on the dusty floor in the small circle of yellow light. She wiped her palms on her jeans, leaving 2 dark streaks. She stared at the latch. This was it. the final punchline. It was probably full of his old army medals, or worse, more unpaid bills. She took a breath, held it, and clicked the latch. The lid sprang open with a faint metallic sigh. Wait, before you see what's inside. If this story already has your heart pounding, tell us where you're watching from. When forgotten boxes open, when second chances hide under dust and debt, subscribe and stay close. You'll never guess what's been left behind. Now, back to the lock clicking open. The first thing she saw was money. Not stacks, bundles. Thick, paper-banded bundles of $100 bills, tight as bricks. 1, 2, 3, she counted 10 across, 2 deep. 20 bundles. Her mind, so used to calculating 8-hour shifts at $9.50 plus tips, couldn't process the number. It was a wall of Benjamin Franklins staring up at her with their blank, placid faces. She felt dizzy, sick, a wave of nausea rolled over her. This was drug money. This had to be. Her father, the town drunk, the worthless drifter, had he been something else? Something worse? But beneath the money, tucked into the side as if to protect them, was something else. A small, tarnished silver locket, heart-shaped, with tiny, faded engravings of flowers. A set of military dog tags, but the name on them wasn't Arthur Jensen. It was M. Gomez. And under that, a thick packet of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon, the kind you buy at a craft store. The top envelope was addressed in her father's familiar blocky scrawl. It just said, Sarah. She left the money. She left the box. Her hand, trembling, reached for the letters. She pulled the ribbon, and the packet separated. They weren't just letters. They were envelopes. Dozens of them, all addressed to Sarah. All bearing return addresses from places she'd never been. Motels in Arizona, post office boxes in Texas, cheap apartments in cities she'd only seen on TV. None of them had postmarks. None of them had ever been mailed. Her fingers were numb as she opened the first one, the one on top. The paper was cheap legal pad yellow, the ink a faded blue. My dearest Sarah, it began. You're 6 years old today. I saw you. I parked down the street from your mother's house. You were in the yard. You had on a pink dress with a bow. Your hair is long, like hers. I wanted to bring you the doll I bought. It's a Barbie. It's in the front seat of the truck right now. But I didn't. Carol was there. Her car was in the drive. I know what she tells you, what she tells everyone, that I'm no good, a drunk, a drifter. It's better this way. She'd just take the doll, like she took everything else. I'm saving, Sarah. I'm working. I'm putting it all away for you. One day you'll understand. I'm not the man they say I am. I'm just quiet. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I love you. Dad. Sarah's breath hitched, a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She dropped the letter as if it had burned her. The bare bulb above her seemed to dim, the walls of junk closing in. The smell of mildew was suddenly the smell of her entire life. A life of decay, of being told she was the daughter of a man who didn't care. A man who would abandon her for a broken-down truck and a life of odd jobs. The laughter from the lawyer's office echoed in her ears, but now it sounded different. It sounded cruel. It sounded wrong. She grabbed the next letter. The envelope was postmarked a few years later. Sarah, you're 10. I heard you broke your arm, fell off the monkey bars. I wanted to come to the hospital. I sat in the parking lot for 3 hours. I had $50 in my pocket, saved up from a roofing job in Tucson. I wanted to buy you ice cream or whatever you wanted. But I saw Carol's car again. She walked out with the doctor. She was smiling. I knew if I went in, she'd call the police. She said she would. She said I was a bad influence, that I'd mess you up. Maybe she's right. but I kept the $50 for you. It's in the box." "I'm sorry, your arm hurts. Be brave. Dad." A tear, hot and stinging, hit the yellow paper. She wiped it away, smearing the ink. She looked at the bundles of money. This wasn't just cash. It was the Barbie doll. It was the hospital ice cream. It was 30 years of roofing jobs, of back-breaking handyman work, of living in cheap motels and eating cold food from cans. It was every birthday, every Christmas, every broken bone he wasn't there for. All of it converted into currency, hidden under the floor of a 10 by 20 tomb. She found another, written on a diner napkin. "It's cold in Dakota. The rig broke down. I'm stuck here for 3 days. But the sky is big. I saw the northern lights. I thought of you. I hope you see them someday. I put $10 in the box. It's not much. It's a bad month. Don't be like me, Sarah. Don't be afraid of the cold." She fumbled for the next letter and the next. One was on stationery from a Motel 6, Flagstaff, AZ. "My Sarah, you graduated high school today. I saw it. I was in the back, in my truck. You didn't see me. That's good. You were beautiful. You looked so grown up in your blue cap. When you walked on stage, I was proud. I heard Carol tell Mrs. Henderson that you were going to the local college, that she was paying. I know that's my money, the money I sent your mother before she died, the money Carol manages. I hope some of it got to you. I'm putting an extra $200 in the box for your books. Don't let her stop you, Sarah. You're smarter than all of them." Sarah's stomach twisted. She remembered that. Aunt Carol making a big show at the graduation party about supporting Sarah. Meanwhile, Sarah had been working at the diner since she was 16, paying for her own books, her own car. Carol had given her a $50 gift card and called it a scholarship. Another letter, on thin, almost transparent paper. "Your mother's gone. Carol called me. Not to tell me to come to the funeral, to tell me not to. She said if I showed my face, she'd have me arrested for, I don't even know, harassment? She said I'd ruin it for you. She said you were grieving, and I'd make it worse. She's probably right. I'm at a bar in El Paso. I haven't had a drink. I'm sitting here, drinking a Coke. I want a drink, Sarah. I want one bad, but I'm not going to. I'm going to put the $6 I would have spent on whiskey into the box for you. I loved her. I hope you know that. I loved you both." She pulled another, the paper newer. This was the one that explained the tags. "I met a man in the service, Michael Gomez. He was from Arizona. He had a sister, Maria. He talked about her all the time, showed me her picture. She was in a locket he wore. We were in a convoy outside Kuwait, IED. The Humvee in front of us, it just evaporated. Our driver panicked, swerved. We were fish in a barrel. Mikey, he pushed me down. He covered me. He took the shrapnel that was meant for me, Sarah. All of it. He died in my arms. They gave me his tags. I tried to find his sister. I tried for years. The locket was in his things. I kept it for her. I found out later he had a stash, money he was saving for her. It was mixed up with mine. I could never separate it, and I could never find her. The address I had was old. I failed him. I failed her. Half of what's in this box, Sarah, it's not mine. It's hers. It's blood money. And I couldn't even deliver it." Sarah's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the paper. She looked at the money, and it was no longer a salvation. It was a burden, a sacred, terrifying trust. Her father hadn't just left her money. He had left her his life's work, his shame, and his one final, impossible request. They told a story she had never known. A story of a quiet, broken man who had loved his daughter in the only way he knew how. He wasn't a drifter. He was in orbit. Pulled by the gravity of his own shame, pushed away by the cold vacuum of her sister, Carol, who had controlled the family narrative. Carol, who got the house. Carol, who had told Sarah for 20 years that her father was a worthless bum. The last envelope was thick, the paper crisp. It must have been recent. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means Carol didn't find this. Thank God. She told everyone I was a waste. Maybe I was. But I saved this for you. I lived cheap. I didn't drink whatever she told you. Not for 20 years. I just worked. And I hid. I hid this from her, from the IRS, from everyone. Because it's yours. All I ever wanted was for you to have a start I never got. But you have to do one thing for me, Sarah. You're better than me. You're stronger. Find her. Find Maria Gomez. Don't be a failure like me. Fix my last mistake. The locket is hers. The tags are hers. Half the money is hers. The other half? The other half is for you and my grandchild. I saw a picture. Your friend from the diner, Marge, showed me. A boy. Leo. He's beautiful, Sarah. He looks like you. He has your eyes. Don't let him ever think he's not worth the world. Don't let them tell him the lies they told you. Sarah broke. It wasn't a quiet weeping. It was a raw, primal howl that echoed off the metal walls of the storage unit. A sound of 30 years of misunderstanding, of hating a man who had spent every day loving her. She clutched the letters to her chest, her body rocking back and forth in the dust in the weak yellow light. The laughter was gone. The shame was gone. All that was left was the crushing weight of the truth. She was the daughter of a good man, a hero, and he had left her a quest. She sat there for an hour. The world outside, the diner, her eviction notice, her screaming manager, Leo, all of it faded to a dull roar. The only reality was this 10 by 20 box. She finally, methodically, packed the letters back. She put the locket in her pocket, the cold metal a weight against her leg. She put the dog tags in her other pocket. She looked at the money. She counted it, her hands shaking. 20 bundles. She riffled one, 50s and 100s. She counted one bundle, $5,000. 20 bundles, $100,000. Her mind reeled. $50,000 for her, $50,000 for a ghost named Maria Gomez. She carefully placed the bundles back in the box, closed the lid, and slid it back into the oilcloth. She put the splintered plywood panel back over the hole as best she could, stacking waterlogged boxes of Popular Mechanics on top to hide the seams. She locked the unit. The click of the new padlock echoed in the hallway. She drove to the diner for her shift in a daze. The smell of stale coffee and frying bacon usually grounded her. Today, it felt like a dream. "You're late, Sarah," Janine, her manager, snapped as she walked in, not looking up from the schedule. Sarah just looked at her. "Yeah, I am." She tied on her apron, her hands moving on autopilot. But in her pocket, her fingers found the sharp, defined edges of the dog tags. M. Gomez, O. Paz. "You okay, hun?" Marge, the other waitress, asked, refilling the salt shakers. Marge had been her mother's friend, the one who'd gotten her the job, the one who'd shown her father the picture of Leo. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that, Marge," Sarah said, grabbing a coffee pot, her voice thick. "Something exactly like that." All through her shift, the words from the letters played in her head. "Find her, Sarah. Don't be a failure like me." She served burgers and fries, refilled coffees, and smiled until her face ached. Every quarter in her tip jar felt like an accusation. She was a woman with $100,000 in her trunk, serving $6.99 specials. All while a plan, a terrifying, insane plan, was forming in her mind. She had $43 in her checking account. She had an eviction notice taped to her apartment door, giving her 10 days. She had a son who needed new shoes. And in a storage unit 5 miles away, she had $100,000 that wasn't entirely hers. At 2 p.m., a silver Lexus pulled into the parking lot. Aunt Carol. She came in, all smiles and beige, and sat in a booth, in her usual spot, like she owned it. "Sarah, dear," she called, as if she were a regular. "A coffee, when you have a moment, and a slice of the apple pie, a la mode." Sarah's hand gripped the pot. She walked over. "What are you doing here, Aunt Carol?" "Checking on you, of course. I felt so badly about everything. I brought you something." She slid a small white envelope across the table. It was a check for $100 to help with, the expenses. "You clear out that dreadful unit yet?" Sarah looked at the check. It was signed with a flourish. Carol Jensen. "He didn't drink, did he?" Sarah asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Carol's smile faltered. "What are you talking about? Of course he did. Your father. He had problems, Sarah. We all know that." "No," Sarah said, the realization settling on her like a shroud. "We don't know that. You said that. You told everyone that for 30 years. I was protecting this family," Carol said, her voice turning to ice. "From the shame, from him. He was unstable. After your mother died, he just snapped. He was grieving," Sarah said, "and you wouldn't let him come to the funeral." Carol's face went white. "He told you that? He's been filling your head with lies. He was a drunk, Sarah. He would have made a scene." "He was sitting in a bar in El Paso," Sarah said, the words tasting like metal, "drinking a Coke. He was sober. He was sober for 20 years. That's a lie," Carol stammered. He was a bum." "He was a father," Sarah said, "and he was a hero." "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. He was a bum. He left you nothing. I'm the one who's always been here for you." Carol motioned to the check. Sarah left the check on the table. "I have to get back to work." The thought of her aunt made Sarah's hands grip the coffee pot so tight her knuckles ached. Carol, who had stolen her father from her with lies. Carol, who had laughed. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat at her wobbly kitchen table, the eviction notice in one hand, the silver locket in the other. She opened it. The tiny photo inside was faded, a young woman with dark, smiling eyes and hair pulled back in a ribbon. Maria Gomez. She looked at the $100 check from Carol on the table. She ripped it into 4 pieces. "Okay, Dad," she whispered to the empty room, her voice hoarse. "Okay, I'll find her." The next day, she called the diner. "Janine, I need a week off." "A week? Sarah, I'm short-staffed. You can't." "It's a family emergency. It's about my father. I have to go out of state." There was a sigh. "Fine. A week. But don't expect to be on the schedule when you get back." The line clicked dead. She had just quit her job. She went to the storage unit, her heart pounding, looking over her shoulder the whole time, terrified she'd see Carol's Lexus. She took the box. She drove to her bank, the one a town over, where no one knew her. She felt like a criminal walking in with a metal box full of cash. She took $5,000 of her half and deposited it. The teller looked at the old, non-sequential bills, then at her stained t-shirt, then at the box. "Where did this come from?" the teller asked, her voice flat. My father passed away. It was under his bed," Sarah stammered. The teller just nodded, her eyes cold, but she made the deposit. The rest of the money, all $95,000, went back into the box, into the trunk of her '04 Honda Civic, under the spare tire, a new, heavy secret. Then she went home, packed a bag for herself and Leo, and grabbed the old atlas from her bookshelf. The letters had mentioned Arizona, a lifetime ago. It was the only lead she had. "Where are we going, Mommy?" Leo asked, his 7-year-old face full of sleepy confusion. "We're going on an adventure, baby," she said, strapping him into his car seat, her hands more steady than they'd been in years. "We're going to find a lady for Grandpa." "The grandpa who died?" "Yeah, honey, the grandpa who died, the one who loved us." The drive was 2 days of bad coffee, cheap motels, and the endless, humming asphalt of I-40. Sarah drove with a manic energy, fueled by fear and a new, fragile hope. Every time a police car passed, her heart seized. She was convinced they would pull her over, ask to search the car, and find the box. At a gas station in Oklahoma, she paid in cash and was afraid to let the car out of her sight, sitting with her back to the wall as Leo picked out a bag of chips. At night, in the motel rooms, while Leo slept, she would take out the letters and the box. She used the motel's shaky Wi-Fi, her hands trembling. She searched Michael Gomez, U.S. Army, Desert Storm. Thousands of results. She searched Maria Gomez, Arizona. Tens of thousands. It was impossible. She was failing. Just like he had. She was sitting on the scratchy motel bedspread in Amarillo, Texas, her head in her hands, when she remembered the last letter. The address I had was old. He had an address. She went back to the unit in her mind. The junk, the boxes. Where would he keep an address? Water-stained books? No. Rusting tool chests? No. She'd missed something. In her grief and shock, she had only focused on the box. She had to go back. But she was in Amarillo. That was a full day's drive. She cried. She sat in the dark and cried, for her own stupidity, for the gas money she'd wasted, for the $100 she'd left on the table for her aunt to smirk at. "Mommy, why are you sad?" Leo was awake, his small face illuminated by the flashing vacancy sign outside. I'm lost, baby. I'm just a little lost." He climbed into her lap, his small body warm against hers. "It's okay." "Grandpa will help us." Sarah looked at him. "How?" "You said we're on an adventure for him. He won't let us be lost." The simple, childish faith hit her like a physical blow. She took a deep breath. She had to think. What was in the unit? She made a mental list. Recliner, dresser, tires, tool chests, and a box. A cardboard box of his old army things. She had glanced at it. An old uniform, a canteen. She hadn't gone through it. She had $4,500 left in the bank. This was madness. She turned the car around. They drove all night, back to her city, back to the gray, hopeless streets she'd just fled. She got to the storage facility just as the sun was rising, painting the metal doors a pale, sickly orange. She opened Unit 14B. The smell hit her again, but this time it was familiar. It was his. She went straight to the back, to the cardboard box marked Army. She tore it open. Inside, beneath a folded, moth-eaten dress uniform, was a small, leather-bound notebook, a journal. She flipped it open. His blocky handwriting filled the pages. Details of his service, notes on engine repair, a sketch of a flower, a list. Barbie doll, $15. Hospital ice cream, $5. Books, $200. Mikey's share. And then, on the last page, an address written with a shaky hand. Maria Gomez, 214 Adobe Circle, Bisbee, AZ. Bisbee! It was a real place. She sank back on her heels, relief washing over her, so potent it left her weak. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. She locked the unit, a figure watching her from the office window, the facility manager. He was probably wondering why she was here at 6 a.m. She didn't care. She ran to her car. "Found it, Leo," she said, shaking him awake. "I found the map." The drive to Bisbee took another 2 days. Her money was dwindling. The Honda's check engine light flickered on and off, a constant low-level panic. Outside of Flagstaff, the car started to sputter. a terrifying loss of power. She had to pull over, her heart in her throat, and spend $200 she couldn't spare on a new fuel filter at a roadside garage. The mechanic, a man with greasy hands and predatory eyes, had tried to tell her the whole fuel pump was shot. Gonna be $1,200, easy. The old Sarah would have crumpled, cried, and handed over her credit card. The new Sarah, the one with a soldier's mission, looked him dead in the eye. "It's the filter. Change it. I'll pay for that, and that's all." He'd grumbled, but he'd done it. She didn't stop. Bisbee was an old mining town clinging to the side of a mountain, a collection of Victorian houses and old brick storefronts that looked like a movie set. It was beautiful, and it felt haunted. 214 Adobe Circle was a tiny, faded turquoise house at the end of a gravel road. The paint was peeling, and the front porch sagged. A wind chime made of old spoons tinkled in the dry breeze. Sarah's heart was in her throat. She parked the car, told Leo to wait, and walked up the cracked path. She carried a simple canvas bag. She knocked. A minute passed. She knocked again, harder. The door opened a crack, held by a chain. An eye, dark and suspicious, peered out. "We don't want any." A woman's voice, rough as gravel, said, I'm not selling anything. My name is Sarah Jensen. I'm looking for Maria Gomez." The eye narrowed. "Who's asking?" "My father was Arthur Jensen. He served with your brother, Michael, in the army." The door slammed shut. Sarah stood there, stunned. "No, wait, please." She banged on the door. "Please, I have something for you. From him, from Michael." She heard movement inside, the rattle of the chain. The door opened. The woman standing there was in her late 50s, her hair a mix of black and silver pulled back in a tight braid. Her face was a map of hard lines, but her eyes, they were the eyes from the locket. "What did you say?" Maria Gomez asked, her voice quiet. "My father, Arthur Jensen, he knew Michael." Maria stared at her, her gaze so intense Sarah felt pinned. "I haven't heard that name in 30 years. Not since the letter he sent, the official one. He said Mikey. He said Mikey saved him." "Yes," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "He did." "Arthur Jensen," Maria repeated, tasting the name. "He disappeared. I thought he was dead too." "He is," Sarah said softly. "He died last month. He left me something. He left us something." Maria's expression didn't change. "I don't understand." Sarah reached into her bag. Her hand was shaking so violently she could barely grasp the dog tags. "He kept these for you." She held them out. Maria looked at the metal tags in Sarah's palm. She didn't move. Then, slowly, as if in a dream, she raised a hand and touched them. Her fingers, calloused and joint-swollen, traced the raised letters. "M. Gomez. Dios mío," she whispered. A tear tracked through the dust on her cheek. I never got his things. They said there was a fire. They said there was nothing left. They lied. My father kept them," Sarah said, her own tears falling. "He kept this, too." She pulled the locket from her pocket and handed it to Maria. Maria let out a small, strangled sound and collapsed against the doorframe, clutching the locket to her chest. My mother's. I gave this to him, for luck. He promised he'd bring it back. He wanted me to find you," Sarah said, the words rushing out. "He tried, but he said he failed. He left me letters. He left this." She reached into the bag and pulled out the metal box. She set it on the porch. My father lived his whole life in the shadow of what Michael did for him, Sarah said. He saved. He worked his whole life. He said half of this was Michael's, that it belonged to you. She opened the lid. Maria stared at the bundles of cash. She looked from the money to Sarah, her eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning, painful understanding. He did this? The man who disappeared? He didn't disappear, Mariah. He was hiding. From my family. From himself. He was ashamed. He was trying to make it right. Mariah was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the chiming of the spoons. Ashamed, Mariah finally said. My brother saved his life. There is no shame in that, only grief. She touched the dog tags, closing her hand around them. I'm sick. My kidneys, the dialysis, the roof. She trailed off, wiping her eyes. It's a miracle. But it's not right. It's not all mine. It was his money, too. He left me my own half, Sarah said. He wanted me to have a new start. He wanted us to. Please, this is what he lived for. This is what he died for. Let me do this one thing for him. Let me make it right. Sarah began to count out the bundles. 10 bundles. $50,000. She pushed them toward Mariah. Mariah looked at the money, then at Sarah. She saw the worn-out jeans, the old car parked on the gravel, the little boy peering out the back window. You're his daughter, all right, Mariah said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. You have his eyes. Stubborn. Sad. She looked at Leo. Is that your boy? Yes, Leo. Bring him in, Mariah said, opening the door wider. Both of you. It's cold out. For the next 2 hours, they sat in Mariah's small, clean kitchen, which smelled of cinnamon and coffee. Leo sat at the table drawing while Mariah made them soup. She told Sarah about Michael, how he loved baseball, how he'd promised to buy her this house. He did, Mariah said, stirring the pot. His army insurance, it bought this house. But the upkeep, the taxes, and now the pills. I was going to lose it. Your father? She shook her head. He didn't just save your father's life. He saved mine too. 30 years later. She looked at Sarah. I will take it. Not for me, for Michael, and for your father, Arthur. And you. You will take this. She went inside and came back with a small, woven bracelet of red and black thread. My grandmother made this. For protection. You're on a hard road, Mija. You need it. She took Sarah's wrist and tied the bracelet on, the knot tight and firm. Thank you, Sarah whispered. No, Maria said, pulling her into a fierce, sudden hug, the dog tags pressing between them. Thank you. You brought my brother home. The drive back, the check engine light was still on, but it didn't bother Sarah. She had $45,000 in her bank account, a sleeping son in the back seat, and a woven bracelet on her wrist. She felt light. The crushing weight of her life, the shame of her name, it was gone. She got back to her apartment. The eviction notice was still there, a pale red against the peeling paint. She ripped it off the door. The next morning, she went to the bank. She paid her rent, all of it, 3 months in advance. She paid her car insurance. She paid her electricity bill. She bought Leo 2 new pairs of sneakers and a winter coat. She bought herself a new pair of black pants, not from Walmart. Then she went to Unit 14B. She had one last thing to do. She pulled up and her stomach clenched. Aunt Carol's silver Lexus was parked by the office. Sarah walked into the corridor. Carol was there, with the facility manager pointing at Sarah's unit. And I'm telling you, as the executor, this unit is part of the estate's debts, Carol was saying, her voice sharp. She's had weeks. I want it seized and auctioned. Well, look who it is, Carol said, spinning on her heel as Sarah approached. Finally decided to clear out your father's mess? Or are you just going to dump it on me like he did everything else? Sarah stopped a few feet from her. She looked at her aunt, really looked at her. She saw the expensive suit, the perfect hair, and the deep, angry lines of bitterness around her mouth. She wasn't an authority. She was just a sad, angry woman. "Hello, Aunt Carol," Sarah said. Her voice was steady. "I'm having this unit seized," Carol snapped. "Whatever worthless junk is in there will be sold to pay his debts. You have no claim." "Okay," Sarah said. Carol blinked, thrown off. "What?" "Okay, you can have it." Sarah looked past her at the unit, at the green recliner and the broken dresser and the boxes of old magazines. It was just junk. Her father's real will, his real legacy, was in the trunk of her car and tied to her wrist and sitting in a small house in Arizona. What did you find in there?" Carol asked, her eyes narrowing, sensing the shift. "There was something valuable, wasn't there? You were here at 6 a.m., the manager told me. You've been back and forth. You found something." Sarah thought of the letters, of the dog tags, of Maria's tears. "Yes," Sarah said, "I did." Carol's face lit up with a greedy, triumphant light. "I knew it. It belongs to the estate, Sarah. You have to give it to me. It's the law." "I found his journal," Sarah said, "and an old harmonica." Carol's face fell. A harmonica? That's it? You're lying. What else?" "No, that's it." Sarah looked at the manager. "She can have the unit. I've already taken what I want." She held up a small, tarnished Hohner harmonica. She'd found it in the army box, tucked inside the journal. You inherited nothing?" Carol hissed, her face dark with rage. "You're just like him, a broke, worthless nothing." The words, which would have shattered her a week ago, meant nothing. They were just sounds. "No," Sarah said, turning to walk away. "You're wrong. He left you the house, he left Mark the truck, and he left me this." She held up the harmonica. "It's not much, but it's mine." She walked out of the dim, musty hallway and into the blinding light of the parking lot. The laughter from the lawyer's office was a dim, pathetic echo. They had laughed because they thought she'd inherited a 10 by 20 box of junk. She smiled, a real, genuine smile. They were right. She had inherited a 10 by 20 box, but it wasn't a unit. It was a metal cash box, and it hadn't been full of junk. It was full of Barbies and ice cream and a soldier's honor and a father's love. She got into her car, where Leo was playing with a new toy dinosaur. She put the harmonica on the dashboard. She started the engine, and as she pulled out of the storage facility, the morning sun hit the endless rows of metal doors, making them shine for a moment like gold. She didn't look back.